But without further ado, and while checking our participant list, so thank you everyone for joining us this morning. It brings me great pleasure to introduce two fine colleagues from Facing History and Ourselves. We have Dr. Dennis Barr and Mr. Phredd Matthews Wall. And this is going to be a really, I think, valuable addition to our repertoire. So normally we have a lecture, presentation, discussion. And this morning, both Phredd and Dennis are going to be integrating some breakout groups and some more in-depth discussion into their presentation. So we're really looking forward to that. So just a little bit about for those of you for if it's your first time joining the speaker series. So this is a monthly speaker series hosted by the Global Possibility Network, which is an initiative based at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. And what we aim to do with the speaker series is just give experts and stakeholders in the field of youth development an opportunity to talk about recent work or developing work. So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Nuckola. Before I do that, I'm Andrew Babson, co-founder and associate director of the GPN, and I'm going to hand it over to Mike Nuckola, who many of you probably already know, but he's the founder and director of the GPN. So Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. It's my pleasure today to introduce Dennis Barr and his colleague, Phredd Matthews Wall. I don't have the good fortune of knowing Phredd yet, but I'm sure by the end of this session, we'll be pleased to have him here. I just want to say a few words about Dennis and the Facing History and Ourselves organization. First, Dennis is one of the most thoughtful researchers I have met over the past 30 years. I see we have another participant on the call today, Niobe Way. But Dennis, Niobe, and I were all colleagues in graduate school together oh so many years ago. And hi, Niobe. And throughout Dennis's career at Facing History and Ourselves and elsewhere, I've learned really the depth of his thinking about matters that really matter most to us in today's world. You know, whatever time that might be, Dennis has taken a deep dive into doing the best work he can to understand how we might make this world a better place. So, the Facing History and Ourselves organization, from my perspective, Dennis and Phredd will tell you about it from theirs. But from my perspective, it is always timely. That is, there's always something going on in our world where the intersection of education and identity really matter. And there's been no time greater than the present one to really hear a little about what the Facing History organization is doing. So, Dennis, I could talk on and on about you, but that would drift off into basketball stories and other irrelevancies. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you and Phredd and let you do your thing. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike, for that very kind introduction. Let me get the show on the road. All right. So, Niobe, it's terrific to see you. Been way too long, and we need to catch up.
Yeah.
But I've followed your career and it's been great to see. So anyway,
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Dennis.
very, very nice to see you. And it's great to see all of you. Yeah, Mike, Niobe, and I, we grew up, if you will, in the same kind of soil at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And were influenced by many of the same thinkers, the brilliant scholars that were there at the time. And those same scholars actually influenced Margot Strom, who was the founder of Facing History and Ourselves. So today, what I want to do is give you a little bit of a taste of the kinds of influences on Margot as she developed this approach to moral education. And as the old Chinese adage says, when I hear it, I forget it. When I see it, I remember it. And when I do it, I know it. And so what we're going to do is try to tell you some things, let you see some things, and then Phredd's going to engage you in an exercise. Phredd is the Senior Associate Program Director for Staff Development at Facing History and Ourselves. And he's been a longtime colleague and friend and staff member, and I thank you very much for doing this with me today. We also have David Levy on the call, who is also a longtime friend and colleague at Facing History, working in the New York region. So let me tell you a few things about Facing History. We're going to split the time pretty much between, about 20 to 25 minutes on my part, show you some video clips from back in the day, and then Fred will do the small group activity, and we'll have some time for Q&A. For those of you, this is not going to be a deep dive into moral development theory. I just wanted to mention a few things that would give you kind of a broad general grounding for those of you who are not familiar with the field because of its influence on Margot. So Larry Kohlberg was one of the most influential thinkers in the field, and he was really focused on the logic of justice, moral reasoning. And he had a set of stages that he identified through his research that reflect different forms of justice logic. We're not going to get into how each is different from the next. I just wanted you to see a kind of basic impression about moral reasoning. The moral education approach that comes out of this work is really focused on giving opportunities for students to engage in moral reasoning around moral problems, and that discussions are a very important aspect of that. And by encountering discrepancies between the way we make sense of things and the way other people are making sense of things, that really does spark growth. So that can lead to a sense of disequilibrium where you're sort of not sure how to think about things as you encounter other people's perspectives, and that's an important part of it. Margot is also influenced by Carol Gilligan and Betty Bardage, who were, Carol is a huge figure in the field as well, and Betty was her student and did her dissertation focused on Facing History, integrating Kohlbergian and Carol's perspectives on moral development. And she brought into the picture, in contrast to Kohlberg, an emphasis on the moral agent's increasing capacity to respond with care to the needs of others. And that was missing from Kohlberg's work, who really did not include girls and women in his research and theory. And so she was pushing back and saying there's this whole other way of looking at moral growth that is really critical. And she really revolutionized and broadened the way that we think about moral development. The sense of self and morality comes out of as driven by feelings of connection and responsibility to others, which evolves to encompass everyone, not just others, but also your own needs. And people need a moral repertoire that includes both this way of it responding, but also the justice reasoning. It's not an either or. So from this perspective, we need to pay attention to the relational contexts in which moral issues are situated. We want to think about fostering empathy and compassion and care, along with more sophisticated ideas about fairness and justice. So Margot's journey, she grew up in the Jim Crow South. And so we asked, if we ask her, why did she develop Facing History, and why does she teach about injustice? Or she's no longer alive, but her legacy continues. She said, I will never know the answers. I only know that my teachers did not trust us with the complexities of history. The dogmas were more secure, more comfortable. My classmates and I were betrayed by that silence. We should have been trusted to examine real history and its legacies of prejudice and discrimination, and of resilience and courage. So Margot, growing up in the South, could see from her classroom window the zoo, which had whites only days and colored or black only days. And her teachers weren't talking about that. And it was right in front of her eyes. So how does she move with that as she thinks about developing her approach to teaching? What she does really is, in developing her approach, she's showing a moral commitment it's a moral commitment to not betray her students about the world around us. She also then, well, she summarizes kind of in I think this incredibly brief but powerful way of talking about her approach. She wanted to ensure that her students would learn history, that history is largely the result of human decisions, that prevention is possible, and that education must have a moral component if it's to make a difference. So she believed that history education should really be used in the service of moral development and the preservation of democracy and the prevention of bigotry and violence. So move ahead 50 years, and today the organization has this mission statement. Facing History uses the lessons of history to challenge students and teachers and their students to stand up to racism, anti-Semitism, and other forms of bigotry and hate. It also has a vision, which it describes as a world where students and teachers realize the power of their decision-making to promote a more humane and informed citizenry. Together, we're strengthening democracy by preparing the next generation to build more just and civil societies based on knowledge and compassion. And in a little bit, we'll see more about the kinds of decisions that Facing History.
Hey, Dennis, we can't, are you reading, is it supposed to be on the screen what you're reading?
No, not
Oh, okay.
yet.
Okay.
Not
Sorry.
yet.
Yeah.
Yep,
I'm just literally writing down, taking pictures of everything you're saying, so.
Oh, okay. No, there's more coming, but this wasn't on.
Okay. Sorry.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Sorry.
So in a minute, we're going to see more about the kinds of decisions that Facing History is talking about. But first, I just want to give you the nuts and bolts of what it provides teachers, curricular resources, which began with historical case studies, the steps that led to the erosion of democracy in pre-war Germany and the Holocaust, but also American history, Reconstruction, the integration of Central High School in Little Rock, the Civil Rights Movement, the Armenian Genocide, and more recently, English language arts resources. The pedagogy is critical, and it's really about connecting students to history and letting them make the connections to their own experiences, their own lives. The resources are organized by themes that adolescents are very concerned with, starting with issues of identity and belonging, and moving to issues of in and out group behavior and dynamics, stereotyping and labeling, and so forth. And that leads into then the case study of history, and then judgment about issues of moving from mass violence to civil society, and repair, and then to participation. The student-centered approach really, it involves giving a lot of time for constructing meaning, and to engaging with other people who have different perspectives. The approach is really designed to engage students fully, their minds, their hearts, and their consciences. So what you do as a teacher to create the environment where that can happen is critical. And one of the aspects of that is how to create trust with the students, so that people can really open up and engage with these very complicated and difficult historical and contemporary issues. So it also provides support to teachers so that they can do it. Professional workshops and seminars, webinars, and they're in person again, but during the pandemic, we went fully online. And so it's a chance to really experience the pedagogy and have it modeled, but also to learn the content and to practice. Finally, we have whole school models that try to imbue the whole Facing History approach and its themes throughout the school, and more recently, district partnerships, including one that we're developing with Philadelphia. We have latest count 278,000 educators in our active network in about 63,000 schools. 200 staff members, about 10 offices, from Chicago to Cleveland, London, LA, Memphis, New England, New York, Toronto, and San Francisco. So the history, which at first may feel sort of distant from students, it really does become something that they come to see how relevant it is to their own lives and the implications for their own choices. And that's really the magic of this approach, because it broadens the context in which young people think about what their choices are in relation to right and wrong, by looking at the implications of choices of others in the past and that people are making today. Finally, I want to quote Hannah Arendt, which Margot was very heavily influenced by, which is the importance of creating opportunities for us to be in conversation with each other, which is so hard these days. So however much we're affected by the things of the world, however deeply they may stir or stimulate us, they become human only when we can discuss them with our fellows. We humanize what is going on in the world and in ourselves only by speaking of it, and in the course of speaking of it, we learn to be human. So thanks for creating this opportunity for us to engage. We're going to make sure you have time for talking with each other and for questions and answers. It's not a long time, but it will give you some time to connect. What I wanted to do, as I mentioned, is not just talk at you, but show you. So we're going to look at some video clips of the past. It's had a lot to choose from, but this particular video is part of a series focused on what moral education was at the time, from back in I think, the late 70s. So I am going to hope that the audio works well enough. I was having difficulty when I put this on full screen, so I'm going to play it from the small screen. And if you cannot hear it, would someone please let me know? We're going to start with this clip. Right.
More congruent.
This is not Margot. This is Diane Paolito, but here we go.
So you have no time.
Margot Sternstrom has been a language arts social studies teacher at the junior high level for 11 years. She's also a consultant and conducts teacher and parent workshops in moral development. It was before she'd ever heard of moral development, however, that she began utilizing a form of dilemma discussions in her classroom here at Runkle School.
Now, you're in Germany, okay? You're in Germany in the 1930s.
Margot credits moral development theory with helping her and her colleagues better organize and understand what they had been doing all along. She is now developing what she calls a Holocaust curriculum to further stimulate students to recognize and reason with issues of justice and fairness.
You're about to have a conflict. You've been told that the Jews in your class have to be eliminated. All right, now that's going to be a conflict for you. These people have been your friends since kindergarten. You're 12 years old now. What kind of things do you think would be said at home, in the newspaper in the 1930s? What kind of things are you going to hear?
Your mother would probably influence you. You say, well, it doesn't matter if they were your friends. They're enemies now. And it doesn't matter now what they were.
Okay. What other things do you think you'd be hearing?
It would depend on how many people I had with me. Like if it was just myself sticking up for the whole amount of, all the Jews in my class, then it would really be pointless, because if everybody else believed that Hitler was right and what he was doing.
It wouldn't be pointless. It wouldn't be pointless.
Why not?
Well,
Because he would still believe in his right, and he would still believe in what
yeah,
he
but it
believes
would
in.
have no
bearing.
meaning. Yeah.
But you still, if he has his opinion, that's good. It's not important.
If he really worked at it and really took his views out and really looked at everything and made his decision and then tried to educate people about what his feelings were, I think it would have a lot of bearing if there's one person in the class who sticks up and talks about how he's against it. It'll affect
In class this morning, I'm asking the kids to talk about decision making, to talk about role playing, to talk about what it would be like if they were in a certain situation. And then what would be the pressures to keep them from making the decision that they thought was the right decision. And I think you heard kids talking about those things. And the other kids came right up with, wait a minute, that all sounds okay, but what happens when you're a member of a group and you're the only one who has one decision and everybody else has another? What are the influences of your church? You heard them say, your family. How much are you going to do something when you really fear being punished physically? How much are you going to do something because you owe it to somebody else in terms of loyalty or obligation? And I think the students are really dealing with those kind of questions. At the same time, I wanted them to say, how does this all relate to me? We're talking about Germany in the 20s. So what does it have to do with me? I'm 12 years old. I'm in Brookline. And I think they began to do that. They began to say, if I were making such a decision, could I do it on my own? Would I stand up? Would I listen to what my parents had said? I also wanted them to project what they would do if they were a parent, the type of a dilemma they would be in. Wouldn't it be hard to say to your kid, be courageous, and at the same time knowing that your kid's going to have to take punishment for that? So if you're a 12-year-old.
I want to move to another clip, and we're going to have a few minutes to sort of talk about this after the third clip. All right.
A discussion of would and should questions. Whether, would it be better for teachers in the United States now to discuss with their students would questions? What would you do? Instead of should questions. And Patty came up with would, right? You thought it was important to discuss would questions because it was closer to action. Yeah.
How do you say what should you do?
You want to, you're asking my opinion or you want to talk about it?
What should you do? Because there's no really right or wrong answer to most questions. It's just opinion.
And you think a would implies what? Why is would a better question
What
then?
would you do? Like,
Sometimes when you bring up a subject, you have to expect that there will be different interpretations of what you're saying. You have to listen for that so that you can clarify things for everybody at some level. And then when you're asking a kid to say, hey, what would I do? Or what should this person in this situation do? You will expect that within a class, just like within a group of adults, there will be people saying, I think someone should do this because. Once you get that because out, you want the other person to hold on to it, but listen to somebody else's, I think they should do this because. See if there's some conflict in what you've said and what you've heard someone else say. See if it reinforces what you want to believe in and do believe in. See if you can figure out the reasons for why you're saying someone should take a certain action. And then be able to, in a class situation, stand up for that, argue it, clarify your reasons. And the role of the teacher is to be able to say, all of you have some of those reasons. You have to dig for them. Once you clarify them, then you can deal with them with somebody else. Or both. Some of this discussion groups were really good. I used to think all short.
Germany, they wanted, Germany, the economy will be much better.
Appeal to my sense of loyalty. I used to think discussion groups were really good. I used to think I did a really good job when everybody talked. Tall, short, shy, active, passive, black, white, okay? And after getting involved with some of this Kohlberg work and looking at other people leading discussions, I realized that I should, of course, try to get everyone interested and let them talk. But a good discussion wasn't one where everyone said something. It was where there was some content, some reasoning going on, and there was some thinking going on.
We are attempting to teach people to think. We're supporting the process of reasoning and the process of their own thinking. We are not teaching them what to think or how to think or a new catechism of right and wrong answers or a new set of right and wrong behaviors. But fundamentally, we're supporting the process of the development of their own reasoning.
And what happens at those marches? What do they play on? What do they appeal to at those marches? Or did they appeal to, Joseph?
I mean, with all the goose stepping and everything, it was all, and the exciting said that they jumped up in their seats and the talking, everyone got excited, and it was getting you excited and influenced.
Have you ever felt that feeling before? In any
Sure, if someone
where?
gets you really up, you want to learn and more and get it.
I asked the kids if they've ever had chill bumps up and down their back. One kid went on his own track and he said, I've had chill bumps when I've really enjoyed learning, if you heard him. Well, you see kids do that and it's just incredible. Or you see the kid who's absolutely refused to read anything. All of a sudden in the library at the end of the day, kind of waiting, and if you pick up on that person, you could bring them into the library, and they really want you to, but they don't want to ask. And all of a sudden they're really reading and they're really interested. You just see a click, or you hear kids say, hey, we were discussing that at the beginning of the year, and that film really confused me, and I didn't know what it was talking about. And then about 2 months later, that same child will say, remember in that film, I think this fits, now I understand it. And you say, thanks, wow. And also when they see parallels, when they see that what's going on in class is happening in a different context on television, on the news, on the decisions in the newspaper that people are talking about. And they come in and they relate it, and that's so terrific and so, I think, vital.
So, let me try and get back to full group. Great. Before we go too much further, I just want to see what some of your reactions are as you watched, you know, listen to that. What stands out for you about the approach, about what she's saying, about how the kids are engaging? Anything that stands out to would be interesting to hear.
Naomi, you want to say more about her being an incredible teacher?
You're on mute. You're on mute, yeah.
Even though it was, from a long ago, the interactions, Nata, a member of my listening project, is on. Nata, are you there? She may not be there.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, hi, Nata. And it just reminded me of the interactions we have with the kids now. I mean, it was like almost no difference in terms of the quality of engagement. And what I was struck by Margot is that she was clearly tuning in to not only getting her agenda, but really listening to she was being able to absorb new information in the way she was doing something and integrate it into, so she was changing constantly. So to me, that's walking the walk. That she didn't just have this idea and then was implementing it. She was being shaped by the children, but also by her colleagues and by, her professors, et cetera. But the idea is that fluidity of teaching, but also learning at the same time is, to me, the perfect teacher. That she's both student and teacher at the same time. It was lovely to watch.
You really captured something essential about the way she thought about her teaching and about facing history. You just nailed it. It really, she always talked about being, she loved teaching because she loved learning, and she was learning with the students, and that the location of knowledge and power is not all in the teacher, it's in the room with the students.
Exactly.
It's everyone. So that really captured it. And does anyone else want to say something?
I was going to chime in and say that what stood out to me was how she was pushing the boundaries of their thinking, but in particular when she focused on what do you mean by would, right? When you just kind of just drilling and sort of making them reflect and think and be very thoughtful about why they're choosing a certain word, like a would, right? So I don't know, that really stood out. And then also how she captivated their attention. I think about Socratic method. To me, she was doing she didn't even need to walk around the room. It felt like she was walking around the room just in the way that she was engaging them, because they were so laser focused on what she was saying and grappling with what she was saying as she was asking them questions. So I like the call to higher curiosity and why you're choosing specific words.
Yeah.
Dennis, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that walking around the room without moving image is perfect. Yeah, anyone else want to jump in?
Well, I think the key word that was just said there too is the curiosity, right? That's what continues to be the thread in all environments of adult learning, especially when they're the teacher themselves. Do they keep that fire in the belly of their own intellectual, moral, societal curiosity about the person they're engaging in conversation with, be it a student or be it the student's parent? So, I was watching and thinking it's interesting that it's a class discussion happening through the lens of history. Even though it's a dated video to us, they're still decades back from, the topic at hand, about talking about 1930s Germany. But I mean, these conversations are happening right now in classrooms around the conflict in Gaza, around the conflict in Ukraine, right? And so those morality dilemmas aren't history for students right now. They are their lived experience, when they have those diverse cultural compositions amongst themselves, literally shoulder to shoulder right now, it almost amplifies the urgency to be able to have our educators poised and ready to engage in moral development conversations with their students, because it is the students' real life right now.
Beautifully put. I agree completely. And the essence of using history, which may seem at first distant, so we're not coming in and talking about Gaza per se at the minute. You know, when you start to delve deeply into history, you dig into history, you look at human behavior, but then they start making the connections, and then they start bringing in. So they think it's distant, but then they make it current. I want to make sure there's time. One of the things that you know, the reason that it made sense for Phredd to do this piece he's going to do is for us to experience the pedagogy a bit. And I think you'll see the connections to today through this piece. But I really want Phredd to take it from here and make sure he has enough time to do his piece, and then we'll have more time for discussion at the end.
Phredd, could I say one thing quickly before you jump in, just in response to Rachel's comment? Rachel, what I see in our area here is largely an inability to talk about the conflicts and restrictions in the schools, even with respect to what we're allowed to talk about.
Exactly.
So this old video looked like a refreshing change of pace from what we're seeing in much of public education today. The other thing related to that is Kohlberg's brief point that we're not teaching kids what to think, but how to reason. And I think that's an important distinction. You know, how to think about things as opposed to what to think.
Yeah. The opportunity to develop your reasoning without being told right and wrong. And at the same time, it's not moral relativism either. And that's something that's a fine line for teachers sometimes. It's like there are certain ultimate values, nonviolence, and, you know, treating others with compassion and care and reaching for justice. Like those are values that are embedded, but underneath that, we're going to make meaning of all these issues in the ways that we will as individuals. I totally agree, Mike. It's scary to see the pushback on teaching real history, and the way that teachers are put under incredible pressure to decide, you know, how much risk they're going to take with their careers to even open up conversations like this. So we need to help them, and that's what I hope Facing History is doing. Phredd?
Thank you so much. And I appreciate the last few comments that were raised, because you were, as Dennis said, nailing the concepts and ideas that Margot was trying to teach. To what you were saying, Mike, the closeness, the proximity of certain events sometimes is too close for you to be able to actually engage with it. That's when you're talking about the Palestinian conflict and whatever language you use. But others raise the point of the student-teacher hat, which is something we consistently do in our professional learning to remind educators, you want to think both as a student while you're experiencing this, so that you have something to take to the students, but you also want to remember thinking as an educator, what's appropriate for the group of students that's in front of you, and how you need to lay that out, depending on what you feel they're ready to engage with. And lastly, particular and universal. The importance was to look at a particular historical case moment, so that you can analyze that with some distance, with ability to really interrogate it, but look for the connections, the universality of particularly human behavior, which was Margot's focus. And that's how we can then take this learning and continue to build on that. So I put in the chat box a link to an article on our website called No Time to Think. I imagine even just while you heard the title as you're opening that up, I'm sure many of you have had those moments when you have felt, whether it's today or somewhere in the past, I don't have time to think. I see all this stuff going on. I know it's significant, but is it now that I react? Is it later? Did I miss the moment? So this article will speak to 1930s Germany and a professor grappling with those decisions. This is a part of an interview that you'll see at.
You're on mute, Phredd? We lost you.
I'm still there. As long as you can hear me, you don't have to see me.
No, we lost your voice too.
Oh, did I? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's back now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying is I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, maybe 3 to 5, because I'm watching time, to read this article. We're going to then move you into some small groups so that you all can engage with some of the questions that are at the end of that, they call them connections questions, or to just open and have a conversation about what you're seeing about the decision and choices that this person is making.
Look at us diligently coming back on time and everybody else is straggling.
Well, we could talk here.
I was just
My
gonna
guess
say,
is Andrew got absorbed in one of the discussions and lost track of time.
that's possible.
Well, and I think too, like you say, Fred, like to the motivation, like the why,
Yeah.
right? And how much of, the decade over decade sterile approach to education, on our continent is because of the patriarchal system, the capitalist system of creating us this side of the Atlantic or this side of the Pacific to be consumers, to just be like well-behaved non-producers, non-decision makers, consumers of the global economy, and that's our role. Right? So our political systems, which then oversee our education capacity, continues to have structures and curriculums and approaches and philosophies that uphold the reproduction of every generation fulfilling that role.
Yeah.
And when you step outside of that, oh, all of a sudden something's wrong, as opposed to that's what should be happening anyway, so that we're not stuck in this cycle.
Right? Right?
So
And then we have massive youth mental health crisis and sedentary behaviors and obesity and physical health crisis, like, and we wonder why. We wonder why. Like, I mean, going back to even Montessori pedagogies that came out of Europe in the same era, right? The child has to have a sense of purpose, of belonging, of community. And if those don't exist, we see the results that are catastrophic for the individual and society.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mike, were you gonna say something? Did you?
I was going to say, I spend a lot of time in China as well. And the dilemma takes a little different shape there, but students aren't allowed to really think outside of the government parameters at all. And that's openly talked about. So it's not just a Western perspective.
Absolutely. And Mike, to that exact point of like, what role are those students in China being groomed for to produce in the global economy, right? They are the producers. So they're not to think about other things or personal needs or, self-indulgent, capitalist behaviors. They're to produce.
Right.
For what effort? Because we already know global warming and other things, all that production is not helping, at least the production that is consumerism.
No, exactly.
So it's good to see faces coming back.
Andrew, we've just decided to literally solve all the geopolitical and economic issues of the entire globe in our conversation through education.
I'm sure other groups have a take on that too. So Oh, and by the way, I love the spelling of your
You're
name.
muted,
Rachel.
Andrew.
Oh, thank you, Fred. I saw your Fred and I was like, oh, that's a great spelling of
And someone
Fred.
has a different spelling.
Right, from one weirdo to another. Yeah.
There you go. I can connect. Mine was a gift from my students, though. I must admit that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a gift from my junior high school students many years ago. And I just changed it and kept it.
Awesome.
Amazing.
So I'm imagining if your group was like ours, you had a great time, lots of good conversation. We're just going to kind of continue and roll what would have been a large group debrief into the Q&A so that we can just keep that going and still end on time. So the question I was going to ask, but it came up several times in our conversation, is how does it relate to your own either professional, personal kinds of context? What connections were you making? And we were making lots of connections. So anyone like to speak to that, or something that just stood out for you in looking at this reading and what we've been talking about today? And I did learn recently it takes about 13 seconds before folks respond in the chat or verbally. So we're good.
Kimberlyn, did you unmute?
I did. How did you notice that? You know, the psychology in your background really kind of freaks me out sometimes. But first of all, thank you for this. We had a good discussion. I think what stood out for me was how the professor, so the strategy of distraction, I was telling them in the group, the Nazi regime just kept people, especially educated individuals, so occupied with the trivial administrative work that they couldn't focus on questioning the regime and their actions. And so to me, Dave brought up social media, and I'm just thinking about like how today there's so much distraction that, and I talked about gaslighting, which is a more recent term where people talk about narcissism and all of that. But I just think about how two things, the strategy of distraction and how people felt alone. Those who were, really concerned and wanted to resist the Nazis, they just felt isolated. So I started to see that towards the end of the article, and how, their concerns were kind of dismissed, their worries were dismissed. And so people stopped speaking up and individuals felt powerless. And I think that's what's happening today, that people are kind of going in their own corners. They feel powerless right now for a myriad of reasons. And so the best hope we have is helping our young people sort of see and have the tools to like have conversations so that they could be heard and not be distracted by the noise that might diminish like their lived experiences, as someone raised earlier after the video. So that just came to me. And I see that quite often sitting here. And I should say I'm sitting here right in Washington, literally in the middle of everything. Nothing important this week happening, but yeah, I can't go anywhere. My house is Fort Knox because of what's happening this week. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I like your glasses, by the way, Kimberly. I just want to say that.
Why, thank you. I appreciate it. This is the GPN family. I appreciate it.
That's right.
Such a safe space.
Yeah. We'll drop that in there.
So we had a good conversation, and Kimberlyn, thank you for your comments because they resonated with our conversation too. I think that the question I have, Fred, for you and Dennis is, so first of all, it's one of very depressing. There's many depressing things going on now, but one of the things that I think is wildly depressing is that in the previous Trump administration we had a women's march, and now there's no march. There's no resistance. There's nothing. There's just he's becoming president. And so our resistance is definitely going down and our normalizing crazy ass behavior is going up. So the question to me is, how much do you focus on, you want to resist, but there can be resistance at the particular level, like I refuse to take Waymos and autonomous cars. I think they're the future of dystopia. And then there's, like mass protest. And I'm not sure mass protest, I'm just not, I'm sure, I'm interested in your reflection. Sort of collective action versus individual action. If you were giving sort of your own thoughts, Fred, about what we need to prioritize right now, I'm curious what you think.
So you asked a few questions there. And,
yeah.
I'm going to respond one way in terms of when we're doing our fuller engagement with the content, there's a piece that we use, particularly when we're at the moment of looking at the Holocaust, and just prior to that, where we go through talking about, well, what is resistance? And what's the range of possibilities for resistance? So folks don't get caught, even at that moment, in a bifurcation that it's either this or that. Because survivors chose so many ways to resist. And I think that's a lesson for us to take on. I think right now, there's a reset going on. I think there are well-intentioned, active folks that are trying to recalibrate, trying to figure out what we need to do, what needs to happen. How do you do that, given all the messaging that's happening right now? So I appreciate what you said about there's no Women's March, but that doesn't mean there won't be one.
Yeah.
And so part of it is we need a psychological, emotional, political kind of reset right now. The political is happening. So that's how we respond. I wouldn't go one way or the other because I'm not sure what that decision
it's too simplistic. Yeah.
But I appreciate you lifting that up.
Yeah. Thank you, Fred.
Just jump in with a quick thing. Niobe, you and I are situated similarly in graduate schools of education. And at Penn, there's somewhat imposed silence on leaders in the school. As a department chair, I'm not allowed to take a stance, a political stance. I can provoke conversation, but I'm not supposed to take a political stance. What does that mean if you're a conscientious objector to one thing or another? So I'm concerned about that. And I experience that as part of a slippery slope as well. To what degree are we willing to be muted?
Yeah. I think muted is a good word, by the way. I think it's exactly how I feel. I feel muted. There's an incredible kind of shutting down of NYU. NYU is now, it used to be a campus with lots of benches and open space, et cetera. Now all you see in NYU, in the Village, I'm just going to say this, if you see, I'm not kidding, benches that are blocked off because they're afraid of protesters, walls around the central area where the business school is. There's a wall. I'm serious. It's a wall. It's higher. You can't climb over. It's really super high. There's security force to get on campus. You have to show your ID. There's gates in the pathways to cross campus. There's gates. Any place that they think students could gather has been blocked off. That is NYU, supposedly a lefty campus, supposedly. And so to me, I'm in the midst of total dystopia and then the faculty are completely silenced and people have already been, untenured people have already been let go when they're vocal. Tenured faculty are trying to do different things, but we're having no impact whatsoever. I mean, it is really shocking to walk around. I just came back from being in San Francisco for the semester and I just came back to campus and the whole campus is blocked off. I mean, it's just incredible. And guess what? Crime is going up because when you put the dystopian context, crime goes up. It doesn't go down, it goes up because what we're saying is we don't trust anybody.
So if it's happening at this level of education, we know it's filtering all the way through our education system.
Yes, I was going to actually step in and ask Fred or Jamal or David, is David still here?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Whether when you work with teachers in facing history seminars and workshops, is this the kind of conversation that's coming up about are those opportunities for these kinds of conversations? Because I think teachers need this as much as we do or more, because they're trying to figure out what to do today.
I wanted to jump in quickly and mention something that I discussed briefly with Jamal and with Nata, that we were talking about activism, and I was a labor activist last decade and had some successes that I was proud of being part of and even leading in some respect. And they were about faculty unionization. So I helped co-found a union based here in Philadelphia, which is an at-large higher ed faculty union called United Academics of Philadelphia, AFT Local 9608, if you're interested. And then also as part of the effort to merge the part-time faculty into the full-time faculty union at Temple University. And so I bring that up because I think K-12 educators in the public realm are usually part of either an NEA or AFT union. And I think that is an important thing to think about. So that's something that was going on in my head when you were talking, Dennis, about and Mike, about how this might affect or involve K-12 public educators.
Thanks for sharing that, Andrew. Recognizing we're at time, but that's up to you. I can stay.
Yeah, I can too. And I'm just going to make a reference to glancing at the chat box, because there's a lot of good stuff in the chat box. References, a reference to reminding us there is some activism going on. There's a march or something that's about to happen in a couple of weeks. So that should at least, I hope, give us some solace that while you may be in a place where you are kind of muted or restricted, that there are other things happening on, which means that there is other possibilities for us as well.
Great.
And I was sort of, we're not going to have time for this discussion, but what would happen, Mike or Niobe, if you were to bring this kind of resource to a faculty meeting, with an agenda to discuss like that very issue around silencing and to open up the discussion, because you don't want to wait until it's too far down a road where your conscience is telling you to act and you're going to risk your job by saying something.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is already happening. The truth of the matter is that the faculty, we've all tried to, most of our schools have voted in no confidence for the president. We've done no confidence votes. It doesn't make any effing difference at a private university run by a board who makes all the decisions. I mean, we have had people, faculty so heavily involved. I mean, doing no confidence votes. And it doesn't make any difference. So at some level, my reaction honestly is I just want to leave. I want to go somewhere else. So I'm looking for another home. But the point is that's not a solution. So it just, it's just, I'm just expressing Mike's frustration. And so at some level, I think, Phredd, I think the solution is, or a solution obviously, is to get involved in other resistance fights outside of NYU so that I won't feel, so I start bringing people, right, connecting where I can find community, basically. And I think that's a really good suggestion. Stuff, you know what I mean? Like where I can feel like I can have an impact collectively. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it'll be huge for you.
Yeah.
So that you can keep that and do the networks, find new networks, etc.
Exactly.
My take on this, just a variation on the theme that Niobe shared, is at Penn and in the public schools where I do a lot of work, the faculty aren't necessarily on the same page either. We have faculty who won't talk to each other any longer because of their differences of opinion. So I try to take the role of a negotiator in this, which isn't easy because I do have strong opinions about it. But I'm often called upon to bring groups together and have discussions about these things. So I feel okay about that role. I feel somewhat compromised in it at times, but I generally feel okay about it because I do think we have to get the genuine perspectives of the different sides on the table. But I've heard statements like, as blunt as, I just will not talk to that person anymore. I can't believe they believe that. I'm done with them. And when you get there, there's not a lot of conversation to be had.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, people won't state the obvious, but I was talking about how in our small group, how there's this campaign against like the value of a college education. So we're talking about graduate school. There's this movement to get folks not to even go to college right now. And I'm just like, even if we're having these discussions in college and debating whether or not you should even attend college because of the MAGA movement or whatever movements, right, are happening, who's smart and who's not. I'm just like, this is insane, because if you're sitting in college and you can't actually model engaging as human beings in a democracy, who are we preparing, and how are we preparing people to even engage in society, period? And then the financial implications, the loans, that are due in these education settings, it's just deplorable. Like, I just feel like it's not fair on so many levels. It's an injustice of another kind, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
I was just going to say, we need to have more places where folks can practice civic engagement and civic discourse.
Yeah, definitely.
Where they don't fear being attacked for a misstep or a misstatement.
I agree.
Otherwise, the ideas don't get out there.
Yeah.
And I would even say in higher ed, in masters and doctoral seminars, having in a syllabus rules of engagement and just guidelines. I can say that I've had some, in my own career as a professor, I've had some frankly very difficult, even painful moments where I felt out of my depth as a professor. And looking back, I might have handled it differently and maybe prepared for those moments that I felt unprepared for. That's something that I think, it speaks directly to what you're saying, Fred, of can we agree on some rules of the game and rules of engagement so that it can be productive without veering into the destructive or counterproductive?
Absolutely.
Our last presenter at the GPN series was Enrique Chao from Columbia, professor at Columbia. And he wrote to me after the election the first time when Trump was elected and said, do you have a civic education problem? How can a country with as much wealth as the US make this decision?
Yeah, I know.
I said, civic education problem. We're not even allowed to teach it in many places.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate question.
And
yeah.
I mean,
to alleviate your American guilt, Mike, I would say we have the same problem in Canada. I have a colleague who has just finished a series of, civic democracy, and again, like nonpartisan, just understand the process, why it's important to engage curriculum. And because of our jurisdictional issues between provinces and territories and what the federal government oversees, like this is going to be a decades-long effort to get this curriculum into, as many schools as possible across the country, like province by province, territory by territory. So I think it's a democratic nation state issue beyond the borders of America. We are failing globally to teach civic democracy.
Yeah, Kimberly, that's absolutely true. Yeah, Rachel, I just want to say that Rachel, you just said something I wanted to spiff off it, and then I saw Kimberly's comment, so I forget it. I'll remember in a second what I was on to say.
I'll just throw in there, I'm so glad that we have a Toronto facing history ourselves office.
Yeah.
There. So there's a lot of great work going on. So we do get a chance to understand some of what's happening there as well. Throughout, because you started referencing other provinces, and also we're working with a lot of different places.
Oh, I know what I want to say. And my brother lives in Toronto, and I'm very connected to Canadian politics, so I'm glad to see a Canadian here too. I think the only sort of positive, it's not really a positive, but it's like when you're an alcoholic, you have to get to the bottom of the barrel to realize you're an alcoholic. And the idea is, in some ways, what my only optimism is, which is a pretty solid optimism, Jamal, this is for you, the resistor who's reminding us of the resistance, is that when we get to the bottom of the barrel, which I think we are, I hope this is the bottom. I hope that we don't go further. We recognize our problems better. than when we sort of cover them over in neoliberalist kind of ways of thinking. So, so in some ways, Dennis, this is what I hope, is that projects like yours and Phredd's, you know, Facing History, and everybody on this call that's part of Facing History gets more attention actually now than it would have had a Democrat won. And the same for my project, the Listening with Curiosity project that we do in schools. We're hoping that this will actually be a spark for more people to be interested, because we're in such a dystopian state at this point once Trump becomes president. So I do think when we look like we're doing okay, our causes oftentimes get overlooked. When it's obvious we're not doing okay, it draws more resources and attention to the good work that's happening. So I want to, you know, if we have to end now, I do want to say I am optimistic that we can rise, because the problem is so obvious.
Yeah.
It's not so, you know what I mean, Fred? It's like it's right.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I wondered if we could give Jamal just 2 minutes to talk about his work in Philadelphia that's going to be beginning, because I think it speaks to some of the issues.
Yeah, we're just scratching the surface.
In a meeting.
What happened?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was trying to get rid of somebody. Sorry.
Okay.
On the phone.
We're just scratching the surface here in Philly and getting the work started. But a lot of educators have already shared that they live in a culture of fear, an environment where they can't have these conversations, even amongst colleagues, let alone try to prepare and empower students for civic engagement. So the goal of our work in Philly is to empower teachers and to give them the tools and help them feel like they're not alone in this work. And so I'm glad that we're doing this work in Philly, and we're reaching a lot of schools. So this is only the beginning of the journey, but we're getting somewhere.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. I'm gonna have to jump off, everybody. It was really a treat.
Niobe, before you leave,
yeah,
little advertisement. Niobe will be the guest on this speaker series when, Andrew?
No, actually, she's going to be the next guest on our GPN podcast series. So she and I are going to have a podcast dialogue about her book, about rebels, and then also the new book.
Jamal, the book is called Rebels with a Cause, Reimagining Boys, Ourselves, and Our Culture. You'd like it. It's written for you.
That's great.
Make sure we have access to that podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I want to quickly just say thank you for having us. And I'm going to turn, not going to be the last one to talk, but thanks for this opportunity to come and share and engage with you all. I found it very enriching. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Niobe. Fred, would you like to offer any further thoughts?
Okay, yes. Not a lot. I just loved the way in which you all engaged in the work that you're trying to do and continuing to do and have been doing. Just don't get discouraged. I think that's the challenge, because there's a lot of effort to stop. And if there's that much effort to stop it, it means we're doing something right. And so we need to keep doing that and network with each other. And I've done some work at DePaul University several years ago with faculty, bringing in materials like this so that they can have that engagement and be able to think what might be next steps or other steps that they could do. So it definitely is something that could work. And just thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for sticking around for a little extra time. Wonderful session and interaction. It was fantastic to meet you all. And stay tuned for our next speaker series event, which will be coming up the first Friday of February. If you're in our networks, you'll get some information about that soon.
Thank you. Really appreciate all you did to set this up.
Yes.
Oh, it was my great pleasure. And thank you all again. Have a great one.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Happy MLK Day.
Bye.